Right, we're now going to address this water lily here. And I'm looking at my water pad and the alcohol's evaporated, and I might need to do a little bit more to it, but I'm going to wait. And the reason for that is because we haven't coloured this beautiful flower in yet, the contrast, the starkness of that white is really standing out against the green of that lily pad. Once I've coloured this in, I might not need to go in and add more dark and blend it through, because the contrast won't be as great. So always, if you've got something like that, it's like when you do skin tone, do the hair next, because the skin tone can look quite orange until you put the colour of the hair in, and then you might not need to go back and change it. So it's just working logically and eliminating that stark white area so that you can then see whether this needs any more work. So don't beat yourself up and keep going over and over and over. Do the next bit and then you can always come back to it. All right, so we're going to start with this, and I'm going to do a petal at a time like we did with the rose in the previous lessons. And I've got 196, which is a very, very, very pale pink. I've got number 26, which is like a peachy tone. I've got number 45, which is quite a deep yellow, and we're going to teach you how to make that paler. And then I've also got my blender pen, because we're going to use the blender quite a lot in this. So there's different ways you can do it. So I'm going to show you all different ways on the same flower. So mine might look a bit odd when it's finished, but you can then decide which you prefer, because you can print these out, stamp them as many times as you want. So I'm going to start with this petal here, because this is going to be light, and I'm going to lay down my blender pen. Now, still very gentle, okay, and I'm not taking it right to the tip. I'm just kind of working 2/3 right from the base, but 2/3 out. So what we're doing is we're adding pure alcohol down first. So anything that we put over the top of that is going to be lighter. And these pinks and peaches are quite light anyway, but I want it to be really pale. So I'm now going to very, 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 very gently flick that colour out, okay? And what's going to happen is that blender is going to pick up that colour and it's just going to soften it. And it might be quite difficult to see on camera. It's quite difficult to see it now for me because it is so pale. But once you're doing it in front of you with your proper light, you'll be away. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to do that pink bit. And then I'm going to go to number 26. That was number 196. So I'm going to go now to my peach tone, and I'm just very, very lightly going to flick a little bit of that peach at the base. Okay, and that means that this bit doesn't have any colour because the blender, I left that clear of anything, and then the blender is dealing with this bit and softening it, and then you can put the depth in at the base. All right, now another way of doing it, I prefer this way, but I'm going to show you this way as well, is to put your colour down first. So if I go in with my pink here, I'll lay that down. And again, I'm using that flick because I want that soft edge. So when you do a circle, you'll get quite a solid. When you flick, it's like ticking somebody's work, which I've mentioned before. It's darker here, and as you flick up and lift the pen, it gets lighter here. And that's the best technique to use when you're doing something like this, because you need that tip to stay really soft. And then I'm going to go in with my number 26, and I'm going to place that down here. So nowhere near as high as the pink was. Just barely touching that, and then you can go over with your blender. So you can go from the top down, like that. And you can go from the bottom up, but you have to be very gentle, because what you'll do is take that colour out. So I think this is the easiest one to learn with. So I'm going to do the rest of the flower that colour. But when I'm looking at this now, I can still see a little bit of that pink there. So what I'm going to do is start at the tip of it and blend backwards with my blender. So I'm going to push that colour back a little bit, but I'm not going right into the pink. I'm just very gently blending this part of the feathered bit. So I'm working back into it rather than working over the top of it. All right, now I can see there that I want to go in and I want to lighten that because that's not as good a blend as the first one. So we can go over and let that evaporate, and then I'll come back to it. So again, now I'm going to work with 196, and I'm going to do it this way. So I'm going to lay this colour down here. because this bit here is going behind. So you can switch between both techniques if you want to, depending on which petal you're colouring. So when I've got something that's going behind like this, I'm going to go direct in with the colour and blend from the top backwards. And then when I'm doing something like this one, I'm going to put the blender down first. And just practice. You know, this is why when we decided what we were doing with Inklily, we did stamps, because you can stamp it over and over and over and over again. And also you can stamp it in different colours. So if you wanted to do it in a very, very, very pale, like almost like a flesh tone, you can then colour over the top, and by the time you finish colouring, those lines are almost not eliminated because the ink's made them disappear, but because you're laying colour on, so that colour kind of takes over from the original line drawing. So lots of different things that you can do with these pens, and that's really exciting because it means at the end of the 15 months, we've got a long way that we can still go and do lots of different colouring in, which is really exciting. Right, so I'm going to do the same with this one because this is going behind that one. So I'm thinking about where my petal is and I'm adjusting my technique to suit that particular petal that we're colouring in. So that was 196, so I'm always going to start with 196 and then 26. So we're just working with two colours here. And water lilies are almost translucent. You can almost see through the petals. That's why I've chosen really, really pale colours for these. And then I'm going to go blend from the top down with my blender. So I'm not blending my colour, I'm putting alcohol down so that the tip of the flick can then be softened by that alcohol, okay? And I'm going to work in here now, so 196 again. And this time I'm going to take that pink a little bit further up because it's a tighter petal. So if you imagine when a petal's small, the colour intensity will be greater, and as it gets bigger and it spreads out, that colour will spread through that petal. A bit like the bud on the rose compared to the petal when it opens. So I'm going to do that, and I'm still going to go back in and blend from the top down with that blender. Actually, I'm going to change my wording there. I'm going to say I'm going to soften it rather than blend down. I'm going to soften down because otherwise that might get a bit confusing. Not just for you, but for me as well. So I'm going to flick that pink up again here. And I'm actually just going to go in here with this peach. And then just soften back. Okay. And then 196 again. And what I tend to do when I'm at home is have like two colours in my hand like this. So I'll do 196. And then I'll switch pens. And I'll go in with 26. And then I'll get my blender and I'll blend back. And these alcohol pens aren't going to evaporate that quickly, so it's fine. If you're working on a big piece, then get used to, you know, doing one pen at a time, but just to show you that's an alternative if that's what you want. So I'm back to 196 again. I'm going in and working around these little stamens that are in the middle, making sure that I'm going into all the little white bits in between those stamens. And then I'm going back to 26. And adding that in. And those stamens are going to cast a shadow, so make sure that you go around those. And I'm hoping by now in lesson 4 that you've got used to the fact that you're seeing colour being laid down, but without actually feeling like your pen's touching the paper, because you're working that light. I'm just going to go back and now add a little bit of blender into some of these, just to soften a little bit more, okay? So you can always go back. Right, I'm going to be a good girl and put that lid and rest that down on the table now. So I'm going to go back in, I'm going to start here. And we're going to work round, so 196 again. Going up. And then 26. Around there. And then the blender softening from the tip down, okay? And then same again. 196. $26, and then back with that blender like that. Okay, same again on this back one, the pink, the peach, and the blender from the top down. Now that one, I just want to take that pink a little bit higher up so we can see a little bit of it going into that blender. And then I'm going to do this petal. Pull that up. Blend that back. Right, Melanie, pink first. Now I've gone in with the peach first there. So all you need to do is go over with that pink right from the base, and it will move that peach colour and then go back in and add the peach back in at the base of that petal, or the bit that you can see coming out from back of that lily. Right, that's because I'm messing about with my pens. I'm going to be really good. I'm going to put the lids back on, but not tighten them. And I'm going to work logically. I'm bad at this. When I'm doing it by myself, it doesn't matter, but when I'm teaching you guys, I need to remember to behave. And then I'm going to do that one at the same time, because they've got two small ones. I've got that time. I can just do a little cluster of them at once. And then go in with my 26. And I am literally just filling in the areas in between the stamens and just adding that depth into the centre of that lovely flower. And again, make sure when you're putting the peach in that it goes right to that stamped line. Don't think, oh, that little white bit won't matter. You'll see it, right? So just take the time, make the effort just to do those little bits that make a big difference at the end. Okay, right, so we're getting there now. So 196 again. I'm going to work on this one next. And you can see why I'm doing a petal at a time, because like we did with the rose, it's much easier to see where the depth is. You're not overwhelmed by lots of lines. So I try and always work, if I can, a petal at a time, because it makes me focus on one small area. It's not overwhelming, it makes it easier to deal with. And it means that I can get the light and shade in exactly the right place that I want it in. Now, if you feel that there's a little bit too much peach, maybe on one of these, instead of going back in and moving it with your blender, go back in and move it with your 196. And soften the peach with the pink rather than the blender, okay? So again, I'm going in, just getting that colour down. And picking up number 26. And think about this. So this petal here, I'm going to have it darker down here and then right up against that black line there. And then blender. And soften. And again, when you colour this, every time it will be different. That's the lovely thing about it. But don't forget as well, we've got that unique angel policy with Inklily. So if you've coloured something, if you're making to sell, and this became very apparent when we do the background class, if you're going to colour it every single time, it's going to take you forever and you're never going to get paid for your work. So I managed to convince the team that we would have an angel policy that meant that you can colour the first one and then you can photocopy it up to 75 times per design per year. So if you're making to sell, it's still a hand coloured image. It's like an artist. An artist does one painting and then prints are sold from that painting. They don't go in and repaint the whole thing again next time somebody wants one. So you're just doing the same thing, and I think that's really great that we've managed to achieve that, because it means that you're not spending hours and hours and hours and hours colouring a card that you're going to charge £2-3 for, because that's frustrating. So I think that's a great thing that we've managed to agree there, but that only applies for the Inklily images. Okay, we can't speak for any other companies. We don't know, you know. We've had these images drawn by one of the graphic designers at the iHub, so she's agreed that we can do that, but it is just, as far as we're concerned, for Inklily images, so just be aware of that too, please. And then I'm going to work backwards with my blender, soften that down. And I want to just take that pink a little bit further up that petal. So I'm going to go back in and just very gently just flick that colour up a little bit further. Okay. I'm going to turn my work because I want to do this one here. So back in with that pink. And then getting that peach back in there, going up from that stamped image, that line art, and then blending back. And I'm starting to see now that this isn't looking quite as harsh here. So what I said at the beginning about when you've coloured part of an image, colour the rest of it and then see if you need to do more work, because white will always look harsher against a colour until you add that colour into the areas that are going to soften that green down. And then under here, because this petal is curling, what I'm going to do is, instead of flicking that way, I'm going to flick almost on a diagonal, so coming out from this line and following the curve of that line. And then I'm going to soften that with a little bit of pink. Just at that tip, so I've still got that little white area there. And then I'm just going to add a little bit more pink up the side there. Then I'm going to go back in here and just soften that through with my blender, just very slightly in that centre area there. Right, and pink. Now you can flick like that. I actually find it easier to turn my work and flick from the bottom up. We're all different, and there's no right or wrong. So whatever's comfortable for you, as long as you're getting the results that you want, that's what matters. And it is practice. You know, it's a long time since I discovered Copic markers all those years ago. A long time, well over, I would say probably about 13, 14 years, maybe even longer than that. So I've been colouring for a long time. But what's great about having the right marker and the right quality of marker and the right nib and the right ink is that you're going to get really good results right from the beginning, and that's a confidence booster. And there's nothing worse than buying pens and people saying, oh yeah, you'll be able to do this and you'll be able to do that, and not being able to do it, because what we do is we then blame ourselves. It's not your fault, it's the pens that we've been using. So it's lovely to see you, you know, posting your work and us looking at it and going, wow, because it's not just about the education, it's about the pens, and knowing that you're going to succeed right from the beginning because you've got that quality of those markers. And it's just so exciting when people, I know I'm going to meet some of you out and about, and I'm sure you're going to come up and go, oh, I can colour for the first time. And it looks amazing, and I'm really proud of my work, because we're always, you know, we're already hearing that. And that's the best bit for me, knowing that I've helped you get that confidence and believe that you can do it. So I'm just softening now, nearly there with this. I'm going to go in and do these last couple of petals, so soft with that pink, which is the 196, in with the peach, which is 26, and then softening backwards with that blender. So from the tip, very gently pulling that colour down, and then the last petal. And then softening back with that colour. Okay, so I'm happy with that, but there's one other little trick that I want to show you. So in your box you will have Cool Grey 0.5, which is a very soft colour. And what you can do with this is just go in at the base of the petals and add a little bit of this, going up from the bottom on each of your petals. So I'm just going to then go in, and I'm just working very, very gently, and it almost adds like a little shadow just at that base. Just pulling that colour up very gently. We're not going to blend it through, so be very light with it. And that's why I put this in, and also with the water we're going to use this as well. And it just adds, and you probably won't even see it until you start to do this, but it does make just that little bit of difference. And that's why I put this colour in. So it might be that sometimes you look at the colours that I've chosen for the class and think, wow, Mel, really? But as we go through the lessons, you'll understand and realise that there is a reason for every colour. And it might be a technique, it might be that you need those colours later on as well. So it's really been thought through. To help you get the best out of your Inklily experience. Right, so, oh, a little bit there, I want a bit more there. That's a little bit bright. Right, so I'm going to go in now and do the little stamens, and we're going to use number 45. And 45 is quite a bright yellow. So what I'm going to do is put my blender down first, and this is where you've just got to be a bit careful, because you're going to flood an area, well, not flood it as in it bleed out, but you know what I mean, you're going to put a blender, pure alcohol down, and then put colour over the top. So we're going to be very, very, very gentle with our yellow, because it's only a small area. And we're just going to add a little bit of colour, and what that blender will do is spread that colour. So we can put a little bit down, and that blender will start to spread it. So this is why we have a blender pen, not to blend, but to be able to take quite a dark or a bright colour and soften it down and let the blender do the work. So I'm going in and I'm doing the tiniest little dots. And then because I put the blender down first, it will naturally spread that colour. You know when you put bleach on a fabric, or you put blending solution on top of an alcohol ink, and it spreads it. That's what we're doing here, okay? So we're allowing that blender to go in and spread that colour for us. And then I'm going to go back to my cool grey, and I'm going to soften or mute down that colour, because I don't know how much you know about colour, but when you have a pure colour and you add white, you get a tint. And when you add black to the pure colour, you get a shade, like a shadow, because you're making it darker. When you add grey, you get a tone. So what grey does is dull down the colour. So it takes away that harsh colour and it just dulls it down a little bit. And this is a little insight into my brain, which might be a bit scary. But I remember it, that a tint has an eye in it and white has an eye in it. This is how my brain works. Can you imagine how scary it is in my head? Black is a shadow, and so a shade, you add black to create a shade, which is darker, which is what a shadow is. And then a tint has got that grey in, which dulls it down. So yeah, it's a bit, honestly, my brain's a bit random, but that's how it works for me. So what I'm going to do now is I'm also going to take that cool grey and I'm going to go around the edge of this flower and just add in that little depth of field, if you like. It's just adding it in. I'm going to go around here. You'll find things like chalk paint will have like a grey into them because they're a very flat, dulled down colour. They're beautiful, but you can see the difference. So next time you're in a DIY shop, just go and have a look at some of the colour charts and you'll be able to see the difference between a tint, a tone and a shade. Okay, and then I'm going to go around my water lily pad as well. And then I can address whether I need to go back in and do any more with that lily pad. So you can see now the lily pad works with the lily that's sat on it rather than being really harsh against it, because we've added that colour in now. And this is a great colour, actually, this CG05, for going round the edge, because it's a little bit cooler, a little bit lighter than the warm one. And it also gives you a chance to just go in and remove any bits where you've gone out the lines, like I had there. Please don't think that I never go out the lines or I never have to go back over things 2 or 3 times, because I do. Absolutely I do. But the joy of working with alcohol pens is you can do that. You can go back in and you can add a little bit and you can take a little bit away. So what I want to do now is just go back in on this lily pad, and on the frame, which I'll show you at the end, what I've done is I've used glossy accents to go over the top. But what I'm going to do is show you a technique with the blender, like we did on the rose petals, where I'm going to bleach out some of this colour. Because if you bleach out some of the colour, let it evaporate, and then go in with your glossy accents, it looks like a raindrop because you've softened that green behind it. So I'm not just doing a circle, I'm doing almost like an oval shape, very much like this here. Which is why we've put those on for you, so you can practice. And then I'm going to go in here and just going to add them here and there, not in a straight line going round, just here and there, and let that blender do its job. So I'm not just doing this, I'm almost pushing that nib in, and you can see it starts to spread, and when it spreads it, you'll end up with it moving that ink that's underneath it. So you end up with almost like this watermark, which is what a raindrop would look like. It's really clever, isn't it? It took me a while to get my head around the fact that a blender doesn't blend, it bleaches. But once you've got it, you then think of all these different techniques. So if you're colouring like denim, you can go in with your blues and then you can really use your blender to add texture to that, get like a stonewash denim. And then what I would do is go in then, and I might rework some of these again. So do it in small stages to get that colour moving out. And then I would go over with my glossy accents and let it dry. And a great tip when you're using glossy accents is to do it on the project and then do another one at the side. Because if you're anything like me, half an hour in, you'll be tempted to go and go, is it dry yet? Stick your finger in the one that isn't on your piece of artwork and test on that one, rather than having a fingerprint in your glossy accents in the middle of your beautiful water lily. Right, I'm going to do this last one at the back and then I'm going to leave that and show you now. If you're looking at this and thinking, actually, some of that pink's a little bit bright, now's the time to go in and go over with your blender and soften that colour out, because we can't go back in with the pink because we want to remove some of that pink, but we very gently, and I mean gently, like really gentle, go in and just remove some of that pink and that peach. So you can go in and remove with blender if you haven't got a paler colour, but you have to be really gentle with it. So I'm just going to go in and work my way around some of these petals. Because it is quite a sugary pink. It's a nice pink, but it is quite sugary. So I'm just going to soften it a little bit. Right, I'm quite happy with that now. So I'm going to turn this around and show you, and then I'm going to bring the frame in and show you the one that I did originally, because that's much paler. The other thing that you can do, just quickly while I'm here, is you can put some of the pink onto a piece of mylar or acetate. If it's something that's really pale, put a piece of white card underneath it. So if I move this over here, you'll be able to see it better. So I can now see that there's pink on there. And then pick it up with your blender. So you can pick this up, and it will squeak because it's rubber going onto plastic. So it's not that you're pressing down too hard now. It's just the nature. And then you can see now you can get it much lighter. So that's the colour of the pink. That's what happens when you pick it up with your blender. It does take longer because because it's such a pale colour, your blender will lay that colour down and then go back to its original state quicker because it's pale. So it doesn't have as much colour to blend out. But if you want really, really, really translucent, really pale, that's the way to do it, okay? And then just make sure that you brush it out on your blender. So I'm going to just move my pens out of the way a minute, and I'm going to turn this round and show you. And that's the lily that we've just completed. I'm all right with the pad now. If you want to go back in and add a bit more depth, a bit more colour, by all means do that. If you've got a line and you think I want to blend that back, absolutely go in and do that. But that's the one that's on the paper that I've just done. And this is the one that I did originally, where I used that picking up from the mylar technique. So you can see the difference. This one's quite bright, and that one is really, really pale. So depending on your style, depending on what you like, what look you like for your finished projects, whether you're a very pastel person, whether you like vibrant, deep, dark colours, it's entirely up to you. But with the same colours, the same pens, just using different techniques. And that's what I love about the Inklily markers.